David Dunn, the first ever guest on the England pod, capped. Yeah, we're going to be reminiscing about your short time as an England senior player. We'll also be looking back at your under-21 career as well. As England fans, I think we have probably all at some point dreamt of getting an England call-up. Like, what actually happens? It was 2002. It was the first England camp after the World Cup. You were called up for a camp where there was a friendly against Portugal, which you played in, and then a qualifier after that against Slovakia. How did you find out you were in the squad?
That's a good question, because it's that long ago. It's really difficult at times to remember that far back. But no, I think it came back on off the back of me. I was obviously under 21 captain at the time. We'd actually been away on the Euros. I had a terrible tournament, to be honest. And, I found myself on standby for the World Cup. Unfortunately, I didn't get on the plane, and then I was start of the next season. I was actually on my way down to the GQ Awards in London, and I literally pulled out the training ground. And I was probably about 20 minutes down the road, and I got a call from Tony Park saying, where you at? I said, I'm on my way to London. We've got the weekend off. And he said, you better turn round and come and get your boots because you've been called up. So it was obviously amazing that as a young kid, that's all you wanted to do. And obviously my granddad, who was instrumental in me being a footballer and I look up to so much, we were just so pleasing for getting that call.
Quite nice that the news was delivered by somebody who you knew really well, Blackburn legend like Tony Parks as well.
Yeah, I mean, it was just, I couldn't actually get my head around it, to be honest. I was driving back and I was probably swerving about the way of all cars and everything. And it was just obviously I remember it as well as I can do, So I wasn't too gutted about missing the GQ award, that's for sure.
I bet it was a hell of a night.
I definitely weren't getting an award.
And do you think Sven swerved it, David, because he knew he should have called you up for that World Cup squad? Do you think he swerved it because he was embarrassed?
I'm not sure. If you look at the midfielders that I was up against at the time for the national team, I mean, it was just probably really, really honoured to be in and amongst them, really. Although I do feel that, I don't like to blame injuries because I think there's so many other reasons for not quite making that step up consistently. But, I think injuries definitely did play a part in holding me back a touch, I think.
There's as is often the case when interviewing anyone, I have had a couple of looks at your Wikipedia page over the last week or so, and there is one of my favourite quotes from a footballer's Wikipedia page that says, throughout 2001, there were calls from the British media that Dunn should be called up to the England squad. In his column for the Lancashire Telegraph, he wrote positively about Sven-Göran Eriksson's early managerial start at England. That seems for what must have been a 21-year-old writing in the local paper being like, this Sven is brilliant. Did that mean when he got to know the manager, did you think he was aware of your gushing praise in the local Lancashire press?
I'm sure he wasn't. No, I'm sure. But having said that, I remember the press officers at England, and they used to say like all the coaches get all the sports papers and they read everything. So they were pretty well prepped, to be honest.
So you thought, I know what I'll do.
Butter him up that way. Yeah. Now, I think that probably that when I really got in, I think I had a load of support as well from all the Blackburn supporters as well. I had a decent couple of seasons, and it was actually in the crowd for the West Ham game, and we beat them 7-1 at Ewood. I managed to play pretty well and scored a decent goal.
Is that the one where you put it in the top corner?
Yeah, over Shaka as well.
Yeah, lovely goal. Yeah.
So we played well, and like I said, all the Blackburn fans were right behind me, and they were all saying "Dunny for England" and singing the song, and which came to be quite a song that they sung about me for quite a few years. So I'm sure they have their hand in it as well.
It was the first camp after the World Cup, and
as you already alluded to, some great players who were in the squad at that time. Steven Gerrard was there, Rio Ferdinand. Beckham, I don't think was in this camp. I think he was maybe injured.
No, he was.
But what was it?
I think it was the World Cup when he had his metatarsal.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Probably having a little breather, I would have thought.
But what was it like all of a sudden being, teammates with such a great generation of players?
I think if you look through the squad, probably known them through the 21s quite a lot of the lads anyway. So I wasn't particularly shy as a young lad either. I was pretty outgoing, a little bit chirpy, I suppose, and I seemed to fit right in really.
I wonder if the rest of the squad kind of plays a factor in your experience in the sort of questions we're asking here, because actually looking at it, David James is 32, Gareth Southgate 32. They're the only players that are over 28 in the whole squad, and Southgate's got 50 caps, which isn't loads and loads. Owen was the second most with 42, and he's 22 years old. So it wasn't an old or experienced England squad at all. There's actually a big chunk of 20 to 23 year olds like yourself in that squad, like Ashley Cole, Gerrard, Ferdinand, Smith, who scores, in Bridge, Woodgate, Hargreaves, Joe Cole. So it must have felt almost like an extension of the 21s at time, especially as you'd played with them.
Yeah, I think so, and I think that's probably why I felt so comfortable. Like I said before, I remember that one of the first training sessions, the first session I had there, Sven used to do a thing after training, where the players had to put all the balls around the edge of the box, and you had to hit the bar before you got on the coach. I think Danny Murphy's told the story quite a few times what I've heard, and I just kind of had mine. It was coming up down the row, and I was probably middle of the pack, and I kind of just clipped mine. And as soon as it left my foot, before it had even got anywhere near, I turned around and I'll say, "I'll catch you all on the bus, lads." And as I was walking off, I just heard it bounce off the bar and all the lads laughing. So I just carried on walking, didn't even look back. So it was that was pretty good.
Love that. What about the manager? What about Sven? I mean, he's obviously a man who was held in very high regard, as we know, by a lot of players at the time and ex-players after his death. Recently, we saw an outpouring of emotion from a lot of people that knew him. Obviously, you didn't work with him for a long period of time, but what was that experience like?
Yeah, do you know what? He was like you said, very, very well respected in the game. Actually, I thought Sven and Todd were quite quiet, really. I think they were just quite unassuming, went about their business in quite a quiet, calm way, really. Didn't feel under any pressure that you had to perform. They made you feel pretty confident. And I think going on at half time, I just remember him saying, "Let's go on and be confident and do your bit. You'll be fine."
One of the things that's really different about that era and previous eras compared to the current era, and you kind of touched on it when George mentioned your Lancashire Telegraph column, is that the way that England was talked about, because social media didn't exist, it was entirely through the media, basically, and down the pub, I guess, where sadly we can't get any recreations of those conversations at that time. I'm sure the pubs of Blackburn and Lancashire were all talking about David Dunn for England. But one of the things that's amazing is that...
Definitely were that night when I went out.
Sven talks so openly about the famous, infamous left-sided problem. You can find quotes about him talking about like every possible player that could feasibly play on the left, even if it's a bit crowbarred. And he goes in some depth about like what he perceives to be the benefits or the drawbacks of that situation. And of course, you're part of this conversation as well. I found a piece, I think it was maybe in the Guardian. You scored a goal in 2001 for the 21s against the Netherlands, where, according to the report, just before the hour mark, cut in from the left wing at pace, skipped past 5 Dutch defenders and calmly side-footed the ball into the net. And then the obvious next sentence, it was a goal that suggested Dunn might just be the answer to Sven-Goran Eriksson's well-publicised problems on the left side of the senior team.
Yeah, well, listen, I was, I think at Blackburn, obviously, I was a central midfielder. That's where I was brought up playing in the middle of the pitch. I enjoyed it. I wouldn't say I particularly enjoyed playing on the left or the right. I think, when I was playing in the middle of the pitch, I kind of found myself quite often at times going out to the left side, naturally because I'm right-footed and I wanted to come in and try and create things, and I felt pretty comfortable out there. And was the answer? Well, I'm not sure. Although I was maybe quick enough over 10 yards, I'm not sure I can. The running up and down that wing constantly would have probably suited me, but unfortunately, I didn't get the chance too much either.
But when you were in that time, when you were hoping to be called up to the squad, when you got your call up, and you're looking at all the other players in the squad, you know that Gerrard's there, you had Nicky Butt in midfield at the time as well. Hargreaves was playing there. Lampard would come into the team in a few years, but did you look at it and think, right, I think I'm good enough to get in one of the two central midfield spots in a 4-4-2, or did you think, actually, you know what, maybe I'm going to be out on the left here?
But that's a good question. You know what? Like I said earlier, I think remember these guys that I'm up against we're playing week in week out against them for our clubs, and without sounding too out there, I don't look back at my career and think that any player really had the better of me consistently. I think I held me on with majority of the players. The only one that he isn't English, but I would say was the best player I played against in that position was Patrick Vieira, where I thought probably I need to be right at my best here to get anywhere near this guy. But no, I used to go out on the pitch every single weekend and want to prove that I'm better than the opposite position to me.
Good name to bring up there, given that you scored 2 goals at Highbury against Arsenal.
I didn't want to mention.
But given at this stage of your career, under-21s captain, just got called up to England squads, on standby for the World Cup squads. Obviously, it comes shortly before your move to Birmingham, which to our younger listeners, a move from Blackburn to Birmingham may not seem the kind of career path, but it was at the time a move up towards what you hope would be a career at the top level with them. But was there ever any links with the kind of Liverpool's, Arsenal's, United's at the time?
Yeah, there was, and I shared the same agent as Steve Bruce at the time, so I think that had a little bit to do with that. Was it the best move for me for my career? I would have to say probably not, but I did have. I had a really good rapport with the Birmingham City fans. I'm actually going down there end of this month in a couple of weeks to as a former player as an appearance. So I really loved my time at Birmingham. However, I mean, I look back in the talks I had. I spoke with Chelsea, albeit just before the Abramovich money came in. I spoke with David Moyes. I spoke with Steve McLaren at Middlesbrough, and then I think there was Valencia as well in Spain.
That's peak. That's peak Valencia, isn't it? That's when they won the league.
And it was the president, I think, that wanted to sign me as well. So
wow.
Yeah, I had a couple of things. I was a little bit of a home bird as well. If I'm being honest, I was really close to my family and being in the northwest. I look back and think, geez, I mean, it was. I look at my lad now who's at Blackburn, and I just think there's no way I'd have advised him to go to Birmingham from Blackburn. We just finished 5th in the league.
You're sticking him on a plane to Valencia, aren't you?
100%. Si, senor.
You could have been Danny Parejo could have been the new David Dunn.
Oh, honestly, I just look back and think, what was I doing? But the benefit I think of certainly my lad and ex-players, lads that are playing out there, that the kind of the second generation or third, fourth generation of people being involved in football. I wasn't. I was like the first person in my family that had managed to carve a career out in football. And we didn't know. We didn't actually know, and I think that's probably the crying shame, really.
Well,
Because
about 20 years later, a bloke from the northwest went over to Valencia, and it didn't go too well for him. So maybe you made the right decision in the end.
I wouldn't be bothering learning my Spanish now, though, would I? Be fluent, so that'd be one tick box.
Well, let's look at the top of the show. You threatened to say that you couldn't remember how the call-up came about, so I'm going to put your memory to the test even more here. We just want to talk about the game itself and try and get some detail. It's kind of what we're all about on this show. It's like we just find the idea of playing 45 minutes for England completely mental. So let's see how you do telling us about it. You came on at half-time. England are playing Portugal. It's at Villa Park. You came on for Steven Gerrard. I think there were 3 subs made at half-time, so pretty standard kind of England-friendly fare. England 1-0 up at the time. Alan Smith with a bullet header at the near post. When you came on, do you remember what formation England were playing and what position you were playing within that?
Not a clue. I've no idea. I'll tell you what I do remember. What I do remember is I went in for a challenge early doors and I got the worst dead leg.
No.
And I was like, so if actually
Who was it with?
I have no idea.
Probably Costinha.
If I just remember thinking, there's no way I'm coming off this pitch. No way. So I just remember playing for the majority of the second half with a dead leg that was just so sore. And I just felt that there's no way I'm coming off the pitch, especially with having a couple of injuries anyway before and then coming off on your debut. There's no way I was doing that.
And do you remember what the intensity of the game was like, or anything along those lines?
Well, I think what I did realise is, obviously warming up in the first half and then obviously coming on at half time. It was, it's quite surreal really, because as we all do, we all follow the England team when they're in, whenever they're on telly. Although I think that's probably leaving because that many games now. But
no, we're bringing it back.
I hope so. I just remember looking around thinking, wow, this is I'm actually making my debut for England. I couldn't quite believe it in a way. It was a bit bittersweet, I've got to say, because I've obviously dreamt of playing at Wembley since being 5 or 6 years old, and I managed to win the League Cup, the Worthington Cup final, and that was at Cardiff. Millennium Stadium, and my England debut was at Villa Park, so I never got the chance to play at Wembley, which I was absolutely gutted about. Probably the closest I got to it was when we got knocked out maybe 10 years ago against Millwall, and I felt that was a really good chance for us to get to the final, which I was gutted. So I actually never played at Wembley, and my cousin managed to play there twice. He played there in 2 FA Vase finals, so never mind.
I'm sure you've got plenty over him as well. So I've actually got some supporting evidence to help with a memory here. The highlights of the game are hard to find, and I'm looking out for David Dunn wearing number 15 on the short highlights that I did find. Portugal equalised in the second half with a header from a corner, and I think they hit the post or the bar from 2 other set pieces. So part of the issue was no one knew who was meant to be marking who. And when they score, Costinha heads home from a corner. You're standing on the near post. He heads it in the far post, so no blame attached to you there. You've just
that's a good job.
You're just happy standing there with your dead leg, giving it a rest, I think. But on the highlights, there is one England attack which you are a part of, and I wonder if you've ever seen this footage. I've just WhatsApped you the screen recording, but you get the ball out on the left wing.
Look pass. I kind of remember doing a bit of a no look at some point.
That's exactly it. You sort of you approach the defender 1v1. Quite a half-hearted step over, I will say. Not a lot of actual ingenuity in that one. And then an overlapping Wayne Bridge just gets a lovely little no-look into his path, and he sets up Emu Heskey, who should score.
Yeah, well, that's the one. Yeah, I kind of had a little bit of a habit of doing that for quite a few seasons. I don't know why I just kept doing it, but I think that's something like that. You have to go out there as a player and express yourself and be a little bit different, I suppose. And obviously, I've seen the squad as well, and with Joe Cole, who was again a year below me, I think Cole was, but another bit of a maverick, really. Wants to get on the ball, wants to do tricks, thinking every time he gets it, he wants to go past someone, and that was probably very similar.
Of all the,
I love Gaza growing up. Gaza was my hero, so I was like, when I was a young kid, I must have watched. He did a video VHS at the time because it was that. I'm that old now. The kids won't even know what that is, I don't think. But there was a video called Gaza the Real Me, and I must have watched that video. I must have watched it 500 times. I knew every little bit. I loved him. So I based every bit of my game on him. And so every time I got the ball, I wanted to go past people. I wanted to make things happen. Just how it was.
You'd have been, I think, 10 years old for Italia 90, which feels like a pretty big moment to experience that incredible World Cup, but also, your hero Gaza and the role that he played in it. How much did that tournament, I guess, and I guess 6 years later as well, Euro 96. How much those tournaments shape you as a football fan and as a player?
Yeah, I think 1990 was like the most amazing tournament that I think that for me that I'll ever see. I just felt, I remember being a young kid. I remember finishing school at 3:30, and I think there was a kick-off at 4:00. I remember just getting out the registration and the classroom and just running home. And I remember my granddad used to tape every game, so we had VHSs piled up of all the videos. So even I don't know, Costa Rica, whoever it, you know what I mean, or whichever team. I remember. I think the first game was Cameroon Argentina, right? Is that right? Yeah. Just amazing World Cup, and obviously what happened and Gaza and stuff. I just think they all became national heroes, really. Brilliant group of players, and I think we're so unlucky not to. I actually think we'd have won the World Cup that year if we'd have got through that semis.
I had the equivalent for me was the VHS every goal from World Cup 1998. Which starts with
France, right? France?
Yeah, exactly. Starts with Brazil, Cesar Sampaio heading home at the near post from a corner against Scotland. John Collins scoring a penalty in a 2-1 defeat, and it's just like every game. I can do it in chronological order. I can see the goals in my head. It's really a special.
I think that's what when you're that kind of. How old would you be at 1998?
I was 6 around the time of the final, and then I would have watched that video for 4 years afterwards.
Yeah, so that's what we're all similar. When you're that age and you just love football, and a big major tournament time, I used to find it amazing. Pity about 94, but that's another story.
But how do you find it now? I mean, as someone who grew up being a massive England fan, who played for England.
You know what? I go around the corner, I go around to the local in the hotel bar, and we've got a massive group of people that go in there and watch the major finals. I'll have my England top on,
But the shirt you wore for the cap.
That's in the frame, mate. I just wear an old replica, like a retro one, and I'll wear that and try and get stuck in and whatnot. But yeah, I think the major tournaments, I think everyone buys into it. I love them as well. I love the major tournaments, certainly the World Cup.
That's a very cool England kit that you got to wear. The one with the red stripe on the left half of the shirt, the red stripe down the shorts on the other side of the kit. Quite a memorable one, I would say. I also think if they tried to bring one of those out now, there'd be absolute uproar. But that's a story for another time.
My favourite, is that what you're going to ask me? My favourite England shirt? My favourite England shirt, I think, was about 1998. And it was John Barnes, maybe Lineker, and it was like a sky blue one. It was like the second strip maybe, or the third even. I love that. I had that on. I must have worn that every day as well.
I was going to ask you an incredibly stupid question, given that it was your England debut. Of course, you're going to keep your kit and frame it. But on the opposition team at Villa Park, you've got Figo, you've got Rui Costa. I don't know to what extent European football and international stars like that were on your radar in the early 2000s. Obviously, Rui Costa and Figo, not Costa in particular, not a dissimilar player to you in terms of what he was trying to do with the ball and on the pitch. Very cool to come up against guys like that, I imagine.
Yeah, brilliant. I remember, I think I will have to get the correct pronunciation right. Yeah, Conceição.
Conceição.
And I think I've got his shirt somewhere.
Nice.
So you took his shirt and took yours as well. He didn't want it.
I think I probably just took his and he didn't want mine. But I was definitely getting one of those.
That's a good one to get.
Yeah, it was good. It was good. I'm sure it's his anyway.
I know you had, you obviously, we've talked about your injury issues that you had throughout your career as well, but how long did you sort of hold out hope that you could get back into the England setup as your career went on? Was there a point where you thought, that's probably it for me now?
Well, I was going to actually do a press conference last year and just say I was going to retire from international football. No, I think you kind of know. Debut 2002. I think maybe there was a point in 2003, 2004, and my form was really good at Birmingham. I was playing really well, and the shout was I was getting called up in the next squad. I think it might have been Steve McLaren, maybe. I'm not sure. But there was a lot of talk. Obviously get to hear through the coaches and the manager and stuff that I was going to get called, and I probably had the worst hamstring injury I've ever had on a cold night against Sunderland, maybe at St Andrews, and I was probably out for 2 months. It was a really bad affair, so I probably put an end to that. But yeah,
that's football.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
So David, I mean, what did it mean for you to play for England for 45 minutes? It's kind of amazing that we're basically asking you about a 45-minute spell over the course of about 45 minutes on the podcast. We're asking you to remember a lot of stuff, but just either at the time and maybe if it's changed since you retired and since you reflect a bit more on a career, I'd be really interested in just understanding how you process the fact that you grew up loving Gaza and then you wore the number 15 for England in an international match at Villa Park.
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing to say is, obviously extremely proud that I've actually made one cap. I think sometimes and I don't know what it's like in other countries, but it's almost like when you see some of the newspapers at times and the media, it's almost like the one cap wonders, as if it's like a bit of a, not a negative, but like, oh, these guys were rubbish and this is what they're doing. I sometimes feel a little bit like it's like a negative, whereas I kind of think, well, it's one time more than a lot of other people have dreamt of playing for the country, and I feel extremely proud that I've actually been able to do it once, even if it was. I know my mates give me a load of sticks saying I don't even have one cap; I have half of one.
Everyone's story is fascinating and unique, and it feels, you've already mentioned him on the podcast, but everything I read as well, always mentioning your granddad and the influence that he had on you. Can you just tell us a bit more about him?
Yeah, I mean, and that was my next point I was going to say. I think from a young lad playing in the driveway, kicking the ball with him. If I hit the side wall or the house, he used to make me do 5 press ups. Had to do it both feet, so it was like just a massive journey along the way of trying to, he was on the journey consistently with me. So he always said he'd be happy if I made me England cap. He'd die a happy man. So really,
nice.
Really good that I even got to that point.
That's an amazing thing to hear. I love the stuff about making sure you developed your left foot as well, and you can tell just watching the goals that you were scoring around this time. Yeah, driving from the left hand side and finding the corner with your right foot from range, but also equally from the other side, cutting in and scoring with your left foot. Instinctive finishes like the one you scored at Highbury after the keeper had made a save and you rolled it in from 20-25 yards with your left foot. Like, it's amazing. I don't want to do other people down, but I still find it amazing how few professional footballers are as strong as guys like yourself and others with both feet.
You know what? He used to say to me, "You're not showing me up going on a football pitch." not being able to kick it with both feet. And I've not mentioned him. I've obviously mentioned Paul Gascoigne, Gazza before, but another massive influence on my career, who I've got to say was an unbelievable midfielder. He was brilliant, and that's Gordon Cowans, who I was very lucky enough to watch on the stands at Ewood when I was a young kid growing up. I mean, Gordon Cowans was brilliant footballer, technical. And that's why I was so obsessed with playing with both feet, because from a young age, I used to take in-swinging corners, on the left side. I used to whip it in with my right. On the right side, I'd take it. And that was purely down to Gordon Cowans, because he used to take corners with both feet. And I used to think, oh, that's amazing. I'm going to do that. And that's what I did. And
How
practice, for any young kids, you just practice. Yeah,
how's your son's left foot?
He's left-footed.
How's his right foot?
He's all right, He's not too bad. And I go back and another memory that I hold very dear as well is I used to go to the Bobby Charlton soccer school every summer when I was a young kid on a residential, and my friend that I used to go over with, there's 2 or 3 of us who used to go over from Blackburn every summer to Manchester. We used to stay for the week. But my one friend got really homesick. And I didn't. I was loving the fact that I was away and staying away and playing football morning, noon, and night. But my friend got really homesick, so we actually spoke to Bobby Charlton quite a few times, because he was trying to, he was on site and he was looking after, trying to see if my friend was okay. And I remember he gave us a lift back to the campus just down. It was only about 200 yards, and he gave us a lift he had a white Mercedes, I think. And it was like, and he was just constantly saying, just got to practice with both feet all the time. And I was probably 9 years old at the time, so I was like flipping it to Bobby Charlton speaking to us, and we're in his car, and it's like unbelievable. Like, I couldn't believe me luck. And although it was like a minute drive down the road, I think it was from Walton Hall to the Armitage Centre. People in Manchester would know that. But it was like amazing that one of England's best ever players was actually talking to us. And I actually seen him in a hotel 20, 30, 25 years later, and I actually mentioned it to him and his wife. We were just having a chat about the soccer school, which is, a brilliant time.
That's great.
But then maybe a tougher question. You've mentioned quite a few times that in terms of not playing more for England, or not reaching heights that maybe were suggested that you might reach in your club career from those first few years, you've mentioned a lot about when you compare yourself to the likes of Lampard and Gerrard, maybe dedication is a word that you've used quite a lot yourself, and maybe that being an area where they were doing more than you. Can you explain what you mean exactly by dedication?
Yeah, I personally think that because I was quite naturally gifted as a footballer, and I didn't have to work loads at it. I love playing football. So when I was out on the pitch, I'd be first out there, I'd be last off. So in that term, I was fine football-wise. But what I'm talking about is, the stuff you do off the pitch. So I didn't like the gym. I hated the gym. But I look and think, if I was me talking to a younger version of myself, I'd be like, listen, get yourself in the gym, do all your prehab work, do all your activation stuff, do your lower legs program, really be dedicated to give yourself the best chance. Because I actually look back now and I don't regret many things, but I look in the mirror sometimes and think, if I'd have, could have avoided more injuries, which then would have given me a better chance on the pitch to perform and then do even better, and that's probably what I would say in terms of the dedication, and that's why I'm, even to Isaac and other young players that I speak to now, just say be dedicated, because I think one thing that, Frank was an exceptional footballer anyway, but he was so dedicated, as are majority of footballers. They do loads of stuff. that people don't see.
You kind of the era that you were playing Premier League football, and in your early 20s was during the kind of the golden generation as it was perceived and as it was known, and your debut came at the start of that era. But the criticism that came at that time was that it didn't feel like those players, not all of them, but necessarily wanted to play for England, and it felt like that was reflected maybe in some of the performances at major tournaments. In your experience, both yourself but also teammates and players that you played with, do you think there was playing for England and going to World Cups and going to European Championships, were they a massive inspiration for players at the time? Or was it seen as being, too many games and a bit of a faff not to be able to go off to...
I definitely think there was an element of certain people that they may not admit it or don't want to speak about it now, but I definitely think at some point it was kind of a little bit of a... Certainly in the under 20, I never think in the senior team. I definitely think in the 21s and the 18s, I definitely got a feeling. So I would never miss an international get together if I could help it. But I do think there was a little bit of a not going. Certainly when they're not playing as well, and the team's kind of, more or less picked, I suppose. I do feel that there's a few that missed out really.
And again, back then it was mainly friendlies. Obviously, there would be World Cup qualifiers, European qualifiers, but there were a lot of more friendlies. Like the players these days, there's quite rare it's friendlies. They're usually competitive games with the Nations League and everything, and there are more games. Whereas back then, I guess you could be, and there was all the subs. There was a game in 2003 where Sven subbed the entire team at half-time against Australia, and that must have not helped to make it really feel like you're going there to really play in a game that really means anything beyond it just being an England match.
Let's say I look back at the international friendlies from even when we were speaking before about it, when I was 8 years old and 10 and growing up watching England. I've got to say, I think they were miles more competitive, even though they were friendly. I actually look at the Nation League and I think it's like really, like, what is it? I can actually take it or leave it watching them games. I really, really, really don't. I feel like it's too many. But I used to love the fact that England were playing Brazil at Wembley on a Tuesday night. I love that. But again, we didn't have social media then, and it wasn't out there as much, and that's probably the only real time you got to see them Brazilian players.
Yeah, it's a fair point. I mean, the standard of opposition would have been higher on average in friendlies because you would arrange it against teams that you're interested in playing against rather than being drawn against lower ranking teams. So it's a fair point.
And with social media now, everyone knows everything about everybody. So, that was a chance where everyone could say, which Brazilian players, which Italian. I remember watching a game, I think it was in Bologna, and, it was on telly, ITV, and it was Italy against Brazil from Bologna. And I was like, so many players that I love. I don't know what you guys were like. I used to have like an exercise book, and I used to love Subbuteo as well. Anything to do with football, and I'd write my teams, and which consisted of all the top players in the world, and they'd be in my team, and I'd put them in a shape and a formation.
Yeah,
that's what kids do, I suppose.
That's what it's all about. We're all about England, and in the main that's the men's senior team, but also the under 21s. We find the youth age group teams really interesting, and we like following the pathways of players involved and getting to know the younger players before they become stars of England. You had a really strong under 21s career, over 20 caps, so I think exactly 20 caps maybe, 3 goals and 2 major tournaments, 2 under 21s Euros. England will go to Slovakia this summer, hoping to defend their crown. You also went to Slovakia 25 years ago in Euro 2000, as it was, a month before the senior Euro 2000. You're part of a team that went out in the group stages, including losing at home to Slovakia. And then 2 years later, pretty sure you had the armband under David Platt, 2002. This is, not long before
Switzerland.
Yeah, that's right. Not long before you get your call up for England. I mean, how seriously did you take going to an under 21s Euros in terms of comparing it to, if you'd ever gone to a major tournament with the senior team? How seriously did you take your role as the captain in the second tournament and someone who'd played over 100, league senior games at that point as well? You must have been one of the more senior players.
Well, think the one in Slovakia, I'm sure that maybe Jamie Carragher, Frank Lampard, they were the elder statesmen, I think, in that one. And I was probably the youngest player in the squad. So I started on the bench, and I remember coming on against Italy. I think Howard Wilkinson brought me on and just said, "Go and get Adam and go and make something happen." And honestly, I must have got fouled 30 times since I were on the pitch. They were kicking me all over the pitch, but I had a real positive impact on the game. So I quite enjoyed that tournament, even though you rightfully said, I think Slovakia, I think it was a joint tournament between Czech Republic and Slovakia. I think they joined it. But Slovakia were they run all over us. They were brilliant.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think me and John Hawley got brought off at half time, if I remember rightly.
You must have hated the Italians, David, because you lost to them. Then Pirlo scored, and then 2 years later you lost again with Massimo Maccarone, the star, scored one of the best 21s goals I've ever seen.
Yeah, and then he went to Middlesbrough after that.
Yeah.
But I remember the first one when I was a young kid. I remember Gattuso, me and him were having a real battle, and he kept kicking me, and I was like, kind of got loads of strength from it, because I thought, he can't deal with, do you know what I mean? He's not dealing with me. I'm going past him and he's getting frustrated. But yeah, they were really good memories.
Here you go. Here's starting 11 from 2000. This is great memories. Weaver in goal, Danny Mills and Seth Johnson fullbacks, Ledley King and Jamie Carragher centre backs, Danny Murphy and Frank Lampard in midfield, Thompson and Hendry left mid and right mid, and Carl Court and Franny Jeffers up front. I mean, that, in terms of conversion rate to really strong careers, that's pretty impressive. You're on the bench with Michael Carrick, Luke Young, Anthony Gardner, Luke Chadwick and Matt Jansen.
Yeah, good starting 11, yeah.
And then,
was that the Italy game?
yeah. I'm not sure which game that, I can't remember which one I screenshot that
was.
from. And then 2002, let's see which 11 you reckon was a stronger 21s team. Paul Robinson was in goal. Defenders, Luke Young, Zat Knight, Chris Riggett, Paul Konchesky. Midfield, Gareth Barry, Sean Davis, David Prutton, David Dunn. This must have been a diamond. And then up top, Alan Smith and Peter Crouch.
Ooh, so we're going to play the one against the other? I'd probably say the first one.
First one, I think so.
Yeah,
I think so.
without you in it.
It'd be better if there was a couple from the second one that dropped in.
We're getting all this information from the website we mentioned earlier, England Football Online. It's like this absolute encyclopedia of everything you could ever think of to do with England. And for every single player, if you go on their individual profile, they always come up with some stat that's specific to them, like some random stat. And do you know what your one is?
Oh, God.
You were the 100th Lancastrian to play for England post-war.
That's quite a good stat.
Yeah.
Raise your bat. That's 100 up.
That's quite a good one. It's funny, the same thing as well, like growing up, obviously, at Blackburn and going to Ewood all the time. In the reception area at Ewood, they have a big board that's engraved, and then every international that honours the international behind the reception desk is up there, and to get on that board was, every time I go into the reception now, I just see D Dunn, England. So that's pretty cool to go back in and see that.
You've got such an amazing connection with Blackburn Rovers and their fans. You're a fan yourself growing up, and now your son Isaac, who we've mentioned already. For those who didn't get the context there, he's in the Blackburn Rovers Youth Academy. He's been on the bench for the first team already at a really, really young age. The Dunn Blackburn Rovers story continues.
Yeah, he's doing okay. Obviously, it's very difficult. He's still 16 years old, so he's got loads to do. He's still developing, but in terms of potential, technical ability, he's doing very well. He's had a really good first year scholar, and that's probably what you would say. He's not done anything out of the ordinary. He's just he's got his head down. He's worked hard. He really loves football. He's a good kid. So he's No, he's got half a chance.
Really great to hear about that, and so much else. We're really grateful that you joined us on the England pod and talked us through it all and dredged up some of those memories as well. And maybe the next episode we could hear about some of those awards ceremonies.
Yeah, listen, thanks very much for having me on the show. Hopefully, I've somehow found a few memories rinsing around in the back of my mind. But it's great. It's great to talk about the old days and the memories they have, and some memories are so. You look back on them and then you're so very fond of them. So it's good because you don't really speak about them too much, and then when you get asked the question and you're like, "Wow, yeah," it kind of comes back pretty quickly, and you kind of reminisce a little bit. So it's been good to have you ask me the questions, and hopefully I've answered them well enough.
Absolutely, sounds like your local's the place to be for major England matches as well. So we'll see you up there.
Settle down there, having you all down.
Cheers, David.
Brilliant. Thanks, guys.